Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. If this is your first time, I'm sorry you have to listen to a show like this, honestly, because I talk about toxic behaviors and toxic communication and how some people can be very difficult. Some people can be controlling and manipulative. They can be dishonest. They can be deceitful. They can be resentful. Resentment isn't necessarily something that I would consider emotionally abusive unless it turns into behaviors that cause somebody hurt, make them feel bad. Like when you resent something somebody did and you want to get back at them, that's when it becomes or can become emotionally abusive. But you might actually tend to blame yourself for having such feelings about someone else. There are those who blame themselves, and then there are those who blame the other person. That's like saying, I resent you for what you're doing to me, so I'm either going to make you feel bad for what you're doing to me, or I'm going to make myself feel bad for allowing me to be in a situation with you. And there's a third way to look at this too. I resent you for you not noticing what you're doing to me. That could be another perspective, and often is a perspective in emotionally abusive relationships. Somebody can feel this resentment build up, and then they look at the other person and blame them for not noticing what they're doing to the person who's feeling resentful. Good example of this is in my other life. Before I was enlightened that I was doing my own emotionally abusive behaviors, in that life, like 2 decades ago, I would build resentment for my partner not noticing that she was upsetting me. So in order to make her see or feel my resentment, I would give her the silent treatment. And I would do that with the purpose of hoping that she noticed and felt guilty enough to change or figured it out on her own. Like, what am I doing wrong? So I'm in this silent treatment at the time, hoping that she figures out and trying to make her figure out what she's doing wrong to me. Or she really wasn't doing anything to me. She was doing something that I couldn't and wouldn't accept because I was judgmental and critical and I couldn't accept people for who they were. A past that I'm not proud of, but I'm transparent about. If you've ever listened to this show, I talk about it when it's relevant to what I'm talking about. But in this case, or not but in this case, it is relevant because I built resentment toward a person, but never told them why I was resentful and never expressed what was going on inside of me. So I just became silent, hoping they would figure it out. I had a fear of confrontation. And that's no excuse, but this is what I did. And I had, I really wanted them to figure it out. And I also didn't want to be the bad guy, because if I was the bad guy, they might get mad at me. So I would try to make them feel bad for doing something to me when they weren't even aware of what they were doing. So that's what I mean, is that we can build resentment towards someone when we don't even tell them what they're doing. If I had just told my partner back then, hey, when you say that, it makes me angry, then we could have had a discussion or a fight, but at least it would have been on the table. At least we could have put it out there and said, let's talk about this. But I had a mixture of fear, the fear of confrontation, and selfishness, I guess you could say, when it comes to not wanting to be the bad guy. Like, I don't want to be the cause of the problem. I want them to think that they are the cause of the problem. And in that time of my life, I saw everybody else as the cause of the problems in my life. So I was a jerk. I was righteous. I had sky-high standards. And I was also highly judgmental of those who couldn't meet those standards. And then I set them up to fail by not telling them what my standards are. I mean, I laugh about it now because it's ridiculous that it's coming out of my mouth that anyone could do that. I have these sky-high standards. Let's just pretend somebody's saying this in their own mind. I have these sky-high standards, and I want this person to meet them, but I'm not going to tell them what those standards are. And as long as they never meet them, I will give them a very difficult time. I will make their life hard, and I will make them feel bad. And I will continue doing that until they figure it out. Now, I know there's two sides of the coin here. The victims of emotionally abusive behavior look at that and say, yeah, I've done that. I want them to figure out that they're hurting me. Why should I have to tell them? They should figure it out. And then the perpetrators of emotionally abusive behavior look at that and say, yeah, I've done that, and I don't want to have to say it. They should just know that. They should know me. They should just comply. They should just submit. And then we'd both be happy. The problem is when we don't express what's going on inside of us, we can build resentment. I'm not necessarily talking about resentment today, but I just kind of went off on that tangent because it's a good subject. We haven't really talked about it on this show too much. But resentment does build, especially if you haven't expressed what you feel resentment toward. So if you are angry at something somebody else is doing and you never express it, then resentment tends to build. And it continues to build if the problems never get resolved or if it's never communicated. So you could be upset about something and hope that they figure it out, and then the resentment continues to build and fester inside of you or inside of them because it was never brought up. Whether it was a fear of confrontation, whether it was they should love me enough to know they're hurting me, no matter what it was. But this is what we can do to ourselves. We can cause ourselves to feel resentment towards somebody because we believe they should see what they're doing to us. And if they don't see what they're doing to us, we wonder, well, why not? Why don't they see? Why doesn't that person see what they're doing to me? Why can't they see, in the case of the victim of emotional abuse, why can't they see me when I'm sad and realize that they caused that sadness? Why can't they tell that when I'm depressed all of the time or a lot of the time, that it was because of the last conversation we had, or the conversation before that, or the combination of all the conversations that we've had, or those fights, or the fact that they want to prove that they're right and I'm wrong every single time. I'm building resentment. It's affecting me. And if that's the case, what are you going to say so that that resentment doesn't build? Because how do you get rid of resentment? You express what's going on. I mean, this isn't the magic formula, but this is one way to get rid of resentment. You express what's going on. Hey, this is what's happening. When you do this or say this, I feel mad or sad or upset or whatever it is. So I would like you to stop doing that. Sounds easy, probably impossible to implement in many situations with many people who listen to this show. But that would be ideal. That would be the utopian relationship. Hey, when you do or say that, I feel upset or angry, and I wish you would stop doing that. Will you please stop doing that? And ideally, they would say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that upset you. I won't do it anymore. Wow. Wouldn't that be nice? But they don't. I mean, again, people who listen to this show, that's who I'm talking to. They usually don't. But sometimes they don't realize. I know it's just like the peak of ignorance. I understand. How could they not know they're doing this to me? Well, if you've heard me say this before, most emotionally abusive people, probably all of them, believe they're right. believe that they have to do these behaviors in order to make the relationship better, make you conform to a set of standards that they believe work for everyone. They want you to conform to a set of values and standards that they know works for them, and they want you to comply or submit so that you follow those same standards so that everyone's happy. At least in many situations. That may not be 100% of the time with everyone, but that's been my experience working with couples, working on myself as I've grown and healed through this, and working with individuals in my other program. So what I've seen over and over again is that the emotionally abusive person believes they're right, and because they believe they're right, they don't want to back down. There's a steadfast, righteous indignation. They do not want to stand down because that's what they define as comfortable and happy and right, even though it's hurtful. Even though that when emotionally abusive people are like that and have these sky-high standards and are judgmental and critical and controlling and hurtful, when they are that way, they are hurting the people that they want to have a relationship with, which I know doesn't make any sense, because why would you hurt somebody that you want to have a relationship with when hurting them pushes them away? And let me talk straight to the people that might be doing emotionally abusive behavior right now. Why would you intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously, and I'll explain this in a minute, push someone away from you whom you want to connect with and be in a relationship with and sometimes share a life with? Why would you want to push them away? They're going to say, I don't mean to push them away. They're just not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're doing things to make me unhappy, or they're not doing or saying the right things, or whatever. They're going to have some excuse. I know from experience that's the kind of thoughts I had. So I said intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously. Intentional is what I would call overt. It is overt abusive behavior. It is someone name-calling you, bullying, intimidating, and they know they're doing it. It's intentional. They're trying to control, belittle, hurt you, bully you, whatever. And that is intentional. They know they're doing it, and it's very conscious. So you have the intentional, conscious, abusive person who knows they're doing it, knows that you're hurt by it, or you feel disrespected or embarrassed or powerless by their behaviors, and they still do it. They still do it. They know what they're doing. They see your reaction. They see how you feel. You're expressing in your facial expressions, in your nonverbal language, your body language, your words. Everything says how unhappy and uncomfortable and sad that you are, and they still do it. This isn't a person who wants a relationship. This is a person who wants to dominate you. They want power over you, and they want to keep you powerless. And you become, I really hate to say this, an emotional slave to them because they take advantage of your emotions. That's the overt. That's the intentional. The unintentional and unconscious person is someone doing behaviors that they may not realize are hurtful and may realize or may believe they're supposed to do it because of their upbringing, because of what they witnessed in their family, maybe their mom and dad, or maybe other relationships they've witnessed, maybe the relationship that their parents or other people had with them. They learned how to do this. And really all emotionally abusive people do it because of poor coping mechanisms. If every person in the world had healthy coping mechanisms, meaning how do I deal with challenges when they arise, then you very likely would not see emotionally abusive behavior. But because when we're children and we go through challenges and we don't know how to deal with those challenges, we try to survive. And those survival, quote, skills that we learn in childhood turn into coping mechanisms when we're older, and that's how we get through the world. Just like when I was young, I stayed silent. I did the silent treatment when I was an adult, but I stayed silent when I was a kid because I did not want to evoke what I call drunk dad behavior. My stepfather was an alcoholic and very scary and abusive, and did not want to incite his behavior, did not want to see his reaction. Only when he was drunk. Every other time was fine. He was a great guy when he wasn't drunk. There were other problems, but I won't get into that. But when he was drunk, I was silent. I learned that from my mom. I stayed silent. She did not say things to evoke his behaviors. Didn't always work, but we did our best to keep quiet, because if you said something, it might make him angry, and then who knows what would happen next. So I learned at a young age, the fear of confrontation comes from that. I learned to fear confrontation. I learned that silence is the best way to survive. And then as we get older and get into adult relationships, or we start in our teenage years, we get into those relationships, suddenly we have these old survival skills that we have turned into coping mechanisms so that when a challenge comes, we act very much like we used to act as a child, except as an adult, we become emotionally abusive if we now believe we can control the people in our lives, the outcomes that we get. So these coping mechanisms that we have, we decide that we now are powerful as older people and are no longer in these old dangerous situations. And so any one of us can become emotionally abusive because we don't want to face what used to make us fearful. Like as a child, we don't want to face what used to make us fearful as a child. So we develop these push away behaviors, these protective coping mechanisms that make sure that we continue to feel safe. And sometimes some people will prioritize that over anyone else's thoughts and feelings. And that can be, like I was saying earlier, that can be the unconscious, unintentional, emotionally abusive behaviors that we can be exposed to. And that's the more covert form of emotional abuse. It's under the radar. It's not obvious. And when it's not obvious, that's when it's more difficult, because you aren't sure if you're in the wrong or they're in the wrong, or maybe you did do something that made them upset and now they're moping and being silent, hoping you feel bad about it, like I used to do. And then you change your behaviors and you adapt and you continue changing until you get to the point where you finally are acting in a way that makes them happy, which is impossible. Because no matter how hard you try to please someone who is emotionally abusive, they will never be happy. There'll always be something else. There'll always be something, especially the covert ones, there'll always be something untold and unmet that you will never be able to tell what's going on and never be able to meet because you don't know what they want. So you keep trying and you keep adjusting and you keep adapting and you keep changing, and you never reach their standards. You never meet their expectations. And so they do things to make you feel bad and make you distance yourself emotionally, disconnect sometimes just to protect yourself. That usually happens much later because you spend most of the time trying to figure out what they want and trying to please them, but they're unpleasable. So the reason I brought that up is because the overt ones are a lot easier to say, F you, I'm out of here. I mean, it's not easy, but you know what I mean. You can see what's happening. You can hear what's happening. It's overt. It's clear. If they call you a bitch or a bastard, if they call you something bad, you don't like it, and you know that a loving person shouldn't do that. So it's a clear path. Your decision is clear. You would think it's clear what I need to do because I don't deserve this kind of treatment. But when it's covert, that's when it's very insidious, very under the radar, and you're not sure what's going on. That's why emotional abuse victims are often confused. They're often indecisive. They often have trust issues with themselves. How can I trust myself? I don't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. I can't tell. They have trouble with their instincts. They don't, their intuition. They don't know what's right or wrong. Now let's get to the subject. What I'm talking about today is somebody reached out to me, and I'm not going to read you the message that they sent me because a lot of it's his background, but there were a couple of questions that I want to address. That was the foundation. That first part of this episode was the foundation of my answer to this question. And the person wrote, she's a woman who has a male partner, and she asked, is it possible that my unhealthy attachment style and lack of healthy boundary setting allowed/encouraged him to behave the way he has behaved to me over the years? And this is a good question, and it's also founded in the idea that the victim should look for self-blame. Is it possible that my unhealthy attachment style, so probably anxious attachment style, and lack of healthy boundary setting, so that's something that we all should strive for, have a good healthy boundary or healthy boundaries, allowed or encouraged him to behave the way he has behaved to me over the years? So what I'm hearing is almost a form of enablement. That's what I'm intimating here, is that there is a question about, have I enabled this by being who I am? Let me answer you in a way that helps you understand what has happened. Your personality, your nuances, your attachment style, or however you want to look at this, what makes up you is what complements someone else. That means that sometimes two people fit like two puzzle pieces perfectly, but it's not always healthy plus healthy. Sometimes it's healthy plus unhealthy, meaning you could fit perfectly with another person because you're a people pleaser and they're a taker. That is a perfect fit. But there's always unhappiness in a relationship like that. It doesn't mean the people pleaser allowed it into their life. It doesn't mean you, with this attachment style or the way you are, the way you've been all your life, it doesn't mean that you allowed it. It just means you couldn't recognize it because that's not who you are. And let me give you an example. I am a highly skeptical person. If I get an email that says, hey, click on this, I mean, we all know where that's going. But let's just say it's from my mom. My mom reaches out and says, hey, click on this. I just took this picture. What do you think? But that's all it says. I am highly skeptical. It says my mom's email address. It looks right, but I'm too skeptical to click on anything because I know what can happen. I know how spam works and viruses work and things like all of that trying to con us, all those bad actors trying to con us. So I see this email. Hey, click on this. It's a picture I just took. It's from my mom, but I'm so skeptical that I'm not going to do it. That's it. I carry this skepticism with me, and it protects me. It also delays me. It delays me from maybe instant satisfaction sometimes. So if somebody says, hey, look, check this out. I'll go, wait. Before I check it out, what's it about? What's going on? And so I might delay that satisfaction, that immediate gratification, and I'm okay with that. And it has worked for me in my life. So that has kept me relatively safe, at least safer than maybe other people, from getting viruses on my computer. That's how I've learned to be. And because of that, it has protected me. If you've gone through your life being a certain way and have not had the experiences that put you into a dangerous or harmful situation, then you will not have the tools or the resources to identify those situations when you're in them. This is why people become victims. I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the foreknowledge or the hindsight or whatever it is to predict that this would happen or identify it when it was happening. I just know that I'm here now. And what does the victim of emotional abuse do often? They blame themselves. They look inward and they say, well, what did I do to cause this? Is this because of who I am? Am I allowing this? Am I enabling this? Just like this person wrote. My answer is no. You just didn't know it was going to happen until it happened. You didn't know you were going through it until you learned what it was about or until you felt hurt enough to leave. This is what happens. We get to the point where we finally learn what's happening and decide that we're not going to expose ourselves to that anymore. So it's definitely not opening the door saying, come on in. What you're doing is keeping a door open that you didn't even realize was open. You didn't realize that you had some unmonitored, unsupervised door in your system, for example, your life, that you left open for manipulation and control and abusive behaviors. You didn't know it was there. You didn't know it was open, and you didn't know anyone would take advantage of that. It's like living in a small town and you feel safe and you leave your car unlocked and you leave your house unlocked and you go out for the day and you come back and your car is smashed in and your house is robbed. You just had no idea what would happen. It's like a small town, and why would somebody do this? This is not what happens in this town. This is not what happens to me. It's never happened before. Why should I prepare for it? It doesn't make any sense. My skepticism arose because I started reading about all the things that people do to hurt each other and deceive each other. And of course, I'm going to become more skeptical. And I've been burned. I've been burned before, not with emotional abuse, but I've been in that too. But just with things, people trying to get one over on you or rip you off. It has happened. And so every time it happens, I reinforce what I know or learn a new tool. Just like when you experience an emotionally abusive relationship, you learn new tools. After you heal and reflect and process what happened, you will have new tools for your current or future relationship, if you even choose to get into another relationship. And I know what some people are thinking. They're listening to this right now and they're saying, I don't want to have to be that way. I don't want to have to think badly about people. I don't want to have to keep that door shut and only let the right people in. I think they should just be good people and not bring harm to my life. I should expect that from others. But we know the truth. We know that there are people out there with nefarious intent or unintentional, unconscious, harmful intent. We just have to know they're there. And this is why I say, fall in love slowly. If you're talking about a romantic relationship, fall in love slowly. You need to see all the challenges that come up so you can tell how they cope. I just talked to my ex on the phone. Here's an example. I talked to my ex on the phone and they said that they were having a great time in France. And then what does the other person do or say? Wow, that sounds great. How are they doing? Or do they say, you talked to your ex on the phone? Why? Why are you talking to your ex? Yeah, that's a kind of red flag, or at least an orange one. You want to know why they're reacting this way. Let's have a conversation about it. Why are you reacting this way? It's a great question. What's going on? Well, I don't think you should talk to your ex. Why? Let's have a conversation about it. And then, this is the kind of stuff in the beginning of a romantic relationship that you would want to talk about. This is why falling in love slowly is much healthier. When the challenges come up, you can address them and then find out, is this the person that I really want to spend a lot of time with? Or do they have issues? Do they have insecurities? It's good to find these things out. Now, most of the people that listen to the show, they're not in new relationships. They're in existing relationships that have been around probably for years. I mean, they've been in that relationship for years, and now they are figuring stuff out. Like, why do I feel this way? Why do I always feel bad? Or at least most of the time, why do I feel this way? And so they look online, they listen to podcasts, they read about it. They learn what emotionally abusive behavior is. Does it correlate with what I'm going through? And then they learn new tools. So the question that this person asked, the first one, is it possible that my unhealthy attachment style and lack of healthy boundary setting allowed or encouraged him to behave the way he has behaved to me over the years? Allowed? No. Encouraged? I don't like that word, but he certainly felt free to do it because you may have had no boundaries in place because you didn't have the tools, the resources, the hindsight, the foresight, any of that. You didn't have it. You can't put someone that has never played a piano in front of a piano and expect them to write or play anything that sounds decent. I don't mean Mary Had a Little Lamb. I mean decent. Enjoyable as a piano arrangement. You don't expect somebody who has no experience and no knowledge and no reference to be able to do something they've never learned. They have to do it. They have to go through it. They have to understand it and be immersed sometimes in it. Just like you might be immersed in an abusive relationship of some sort. The challenge, however, when you're immersed in an abusive relationship is that you're so busy trying to process what's happening and figure out if you're in the wrong or they're in the wrong that it gets confusing in your mind. And all that confusion overrides any processing and reflecting that you really need to do. I mean, it can override all that processing and reflecting that you need to do to understand what's really happening, because you'll stay in a state of confusion. Am I right? Are they right? Am I wrong? Am I the abusive one? Are they the abusive one? Which I have an episode on. If you go to loveandabuse.com, just look for Am I the Abusive One? And I highly recommend you listen to that if you are still questioning that, because the answers are in that episode. You will find out if you are. But my point is that you are usually not in the right headspace to learn what you need to learn so that you can avoid this kind of behavior in the future because you're in it. And it's hard to see from the outside, from an objective standpoint, when you're in it, when you're experiencing it. It's like being in a knife fight and trying to figure out the best way to survive a knife fight with the knife coming at you. You're just in survival mode. You are just trying to defend yourself or fight back or whatever. You're just trying to make sure you don't get cut and you don't die. It's hard to process when you're in the middle of it. You are in an action state. When you're in that relationship, you're in that action state. And what you need is a rest state to process. That's why sometimes separating is a great idea. That gives you your rest state. It allows time for the fog to lift so that you can start processing things. And I will say this, the longer any abusive behavior has gone on, the more scrambled your brain can feel, the more confused you can feel. But it does reset. It does come back. You just need some more rest states. You need time away from the behavior, from the influence of the person doing that behavior, good or bad. Even if they're good sometimes, that is still influential. I think of what my wife said. She said that I knew, and this is when she was married to a sociopath, I knew that he was about to throw a brick at me when he was being nice. That's the mindset of a victim of abuse. She knew that he was going to throw a brick at her because he was being nice to her. That's why even when they're nice, you will still be in a state, like a cautionary, protective state, even at a low level, just waiting for the next thing to happen, hoping it doesn't. but waiting for it to happen, knowing it's right around the corner. Believing that in order to feel love, you need to experience abuse. That's the name of the show, Love and Abuse. That's why I named it. It's the traumatic bond that forms. A trauma bond is like when you believe that you can't have love without abuse. And so you're always waiting for that next wonderful feeling and hoping that that bad feeling doesn't come, which means you're waiting for them to care about you, to make you feel worthy, to make you feel important, and hoping they never make you feel bad again. But in the back of your mind, you know it's there. And so you try harder and adapt and change who you are so that you can feel worthy and feel loved and lovable from them. I mean, that may not be your direct intent, but at a deeper level, when you are with somebody, especially a romantic partner, you want to feel loved. You want to feel important. You want to feel worthy. You want to feel like you're worth fighting for, not worth fighting against. You want to feel like you're worth protecting, not the person who's used as a shield for someone else. You don't want to be the punching bag, the verbal punching bag, the physical punching bag. You don't want to be any of that. You want to know you're worth loving. I'm here to say you are. You are absolutely lovable. You are worthy. You are important. And when somebody doesn't see that about you, it's not because you aren't. It's because they're incapable of seeing past their own wants and needs and fears and insecurities and sometimes anger and sometimes their own unresolved, unprocessed traumas, sometimes their own childhood neglect. That's their processing. That's what they need to heal in themselves. Do not take on their processing. Do not take on their unresolved trauma. Do not take on their dysfunction as your truth, because you are so much more than that. And what ends up happening is a lot of victims of abusive behavior start believing the person that's hurting them. They start believing that they're not good enough for the person that's hurting them. That's a crazy making sentence I just said. You're not good enough for the person that's hurting you? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Think about that. It does not make any sense that you would not be good enough for someone who's trying to hurt you. If you accept that someone who is trying to hurt you or control you or manipulate you doesn't have the capacity to see your worth, to see how lovable and wonderful and important you are, if you accept that they are incapable of doing that, then you will probably stop seeking their approval, validation, and anything else that you're looking for that makes you feel special. And maybe you're not doing that. Maybe somebody else that's listening to this is doing it. But I want to just stress that it's important that you don't take their dysfunction as a definition of who you are. Their inability to see you as you are as the definition of who you are. Because it's not. They cannot possibly see who you are because they can't get past their own limitations, their own toxic behaviors that were created in childhood or sometime long time ago, and they do not have any function today, and they continue to use them because they haven't addressed them. And most people don't address their own hurtful behaviors because they are so stuck in righteousness and even selfishness. They're so stuck in that space. And some people need a wake-up call. Right? That's what I needed. I needed somebody to leave me, to divorce me and say, I can't be with you anymore. They couldn't even explain why. I just happened to figure it out, thankfully. I happened to figure it out and tell myself, oh, I'm the problem. I'm the cause of all these issues in my relationships because they keep leaving me. So what do I need to look at in myself? And that's when my healing started. It was like over a decade, like 15 years ago now. So this can happen to some people. The unconscious, unintentional, emotionally abusive people have the best chance at healing. But they need their eyes opened. And sometimes they won't open them. Sometimes they just won't admit that's who they are. They'll just keep blaming the world, keep pointing the finger, but don't bring that into yourself as you being the cause. You aren't allowing, I'm talking to the other person now, you aren't allowing or encouraging anyone to do that, because that's who they are. And that's who they would be, even if you took no crap, even if you had solid boundaries, they would still be who they are. It's just that they probably wouldn't last in the relationship as long because you wouldn't tolerate it. You would see it. You would know what it looks like. So I'm going to wrap this up with the last question that came in that email, which was it me who changed him into this person who seems to be so negative and have such a low vibration energetically? The answer is no. That's who they are. That's who they have always been. Because here's the thing. This is something I go back to all the time, is that we all have a choice to be in a relationship. I had a choice to be married. I had a choice to be with somebody who was doing things against my sky-high standards. I was judgmental. I was critical. This was a long time ago, but that's who I was. And I had a choice to stay married to this person. So I was not accepting of who they were. And I see it this way. If you can't accept somebody for who they are, why are you staying with them and continuing to put them down, hurt them, emotionally abuse them? If the emotionally abusive person is with somebody who is doing things against their standards and values, and they just don't want that person to continue doing them, then they have a choice to leave. That's their choice to stay or leave with somebody who is doing things against their boundaries, their morals, their ethics, their values, whatever. The emotionally abusive person has a choice to leave the relationship, but instead of leaving, they stay and try to control and hurt and manipulate the person they're with. They have a choice. They're an adult. They can make decisions that are right for them, just like you can make decisions that are right for you. But if somebody's really dissatisfied in how you're showing up in their life, instead of trying to control or manipulate or hurt you in any way, they have a choice to stay or not. And I know I'm simplifying or oversimplifying that like crazy, but they really do. Just like you have a choice to stay with the person you're with, but are you trying to control them? Are you trying to hurt them? Are you trying to belittle and intimidate? And are you trying to put them through the ringer? Or are you trying to change and adapt and show up in the way that you hope that they like? Because there's the difference. If you're emotionally abusive, you're trying to control someone. You're trying to conform them. You're trying to have power over them so that they feel powerless. That is emotionally abusive. And that's how you can tell if you're emotionally abusive, if your intention is to control or dominate or keep your power over them so they feel powerless. It's very unlikely that's you. If you're listening to this show, unless you're an emotionally abusive person who wants to change, the people that listen to this show are the ones who usually feel powerless, who are usually looking for a solution. They're trying to do better. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And because that's you, because you're willing to make the changes if you need to make the relationship better, the chances that you are emotionally abusive are very slim. I mean, we all do behaviors that can be considered emotionally abusive, but that's the gist of what makes a person emotionally abusive. That's the intent typically, or the unconscious intent. So to the person who wrote, was it you who changed him into the person that seems to be so negative and have such a low vibration energetically? Nope. Can we contribute to the happiness or unhappiness or comfort and safety or discomfort and feelings of insecurity in other people's lives? Yes, we can absolutely contribute to that. We do that with each other all the time. But are we responsible for it? We are not responsible. It's the responsibility of the person. This is full circle. It's the responsibility of the person who feels that way to express, hey, this is what I feel. Let's talk about it. Hey, when you say this or do this, it makes me feel this way. Can we talk about that? Will you stop doing that now that you know it's hurtful to me, or now that you know it makes me feel this way? And then when we have that knowledge, we have another decision to make, because they may say one of two things or one of five things. They may say, no, I didn't know that. Sorry, I won't do it again. And hopefully they follow through. Or they could say, no, I didn't know that, but, I'm not going to stop because I believe I'm right and you're wrong, so tough luck. Or they can say, yes, I knew I was doing that, but I felt like I needed to because you weren't doing the right thing. Or they can say, yes, I knew I was doing that, too bad. And like I said, 5 things, 10 things, they could say anything, but at least the knowledge is on the table. At least it's out there. At least you talked about it. Instead of, and this is the full circle part, instead of building that resentment. So just like the emotionally abusive person who feels like it's your fault, they have a choice to stay in a relationship with somebody that they can't ever be satisfied with. That's their choice. So to the person who wrote to me, I wish you the best in your situation. I hope this helps. And anyone listening that needed to hear this, I hope this brings value to your life, and you remember that you are worthy, you are lovable, you are important, and someone else's dysfunctional or toxic behaviors cannot possibly define you. Thanks for listening today. Share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook to gain clarity on what your next best steps are. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. If you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone that you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. You can take the course on your own at your own pace, or join the optional private online group where I and others will give you direct support. It's time to stop making those you love feel bad. That's healedbeing.com. If you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. We'll talk again soon.